Hi, welcome back. Today we're going to look at how to use things like Polymeter and polyrhythms to make your riffs a little bit more interesting in the context of progressive metal. Now, I don't profess to be a music theory expert. These are just some of the things that I do to make quite straightforward riffs a bit more interesting. So we're just going to use a riff that I've been working on for my own band Tetra. It may or may not make its way into a song. So you can play it a very basic version in 4/4. Open, then hammer on. Pull off in there as well. And there's a string skip on 12, open and 12 on the 2A sharp strings. And there's a slide down from 14th. We can look at extending that to make it a 9/8 riff by just adding an extra slide on the 8th fret. So now you have your riff that's in an odd meter, but how do you use it? The first and most obvious way is just to have the drums mirror what the guitars and the bass are playing. So the drums are in 9/8, the guitars and the bass are in 9/8, and it just repeats. And that sounds like this. Okay, and all of that sounds quite interesting to start with, because when you listen to it for the first time you realise it's not in a standard 4/4. You get used to it quite quickly and you kind of work out what's going on. It loses its interest quite quickly. So the next thing you can do is to look at using Polymeter, which, without getting into all the technical aspects of it, I'll just show you how I do it. So in essence, I'm going to have the kick in an odd meter with the guitars and the bass, but the snare and the cymbals are still playing in 4. So I would do this by taking my 9/8 pattern, copying the kick, and just pasting it along, making sure it starts every 9 measures. But then when I come to draw in my snare, and my cymbals for that matter, I make sure they're still landing where they should for 4/4. Now you'll see that that puts them at odds with each other, so now the snare doesn't land in the same place each time, but it still sounds like it should land there. And what that causes is this weird kind of phasing effect where the riff almost phases until it comes back around, which is why I call it a long resolution, because it takes a long time to resolve depending on what the meter is that you're using. So that sounds like this. So hopefully you heard that the snare sounded like it was landing in really complicated places, but it's not. It's everything else that's moving around it. Again, that sounds quite cool, but it also sounds a little bit disjointed. So what you might try next is to come up with another meter and make them add up to something that resolves quite quickly. So here I've written another variant of the same riff, which is in 7. So I'll just play that very quickly. Not that impressive on its own, but now you have 9/8 plus 7/8, which makes 16. It's a multiple of 4, so it resolves quite quickly, a lot quicker than the previous one did. So let's hear that. So that sounds like a lot more complicated riff, but it still resolves, so there's still that kind of 4/4 pulse there. If you like, you can take it one step further. Now what I've done here is I've taken that 7/8 section and taken a beat away to make it 6/8, which gives us another odd meter of 15/8. So now we've got a longer riff, but it still doesn't resolve in a standard manner. Now this would probably take even longer to resolve, so what I've done is truncated it, and it's dead simple. The riff resolves here, and here would put it back onto the 1. So I've just put this cluster of kicks here and a simple guitar pattern just to bring it back round to the 1. There's also a placeholder lead ambient part here, which I haven't quite worked out yet, but it's just there for context. This is more or less the finished product. This is what it sounds like. So hopefully you can see how we've taken that something that could become repetitive very quickly and basically elongated it in a way that keeps it interesting for longer. Now, I don't write riffs for the sake of them sounding complicated, but it sounds a lot more complex than it actually is. There's also the fact that someone hearing that for the first time wouldn't have the same insight as the person writing it because they haven't seen the kind of mathematics that go into it. So it's potentially even more interesting for someone listening for the first time. So hopefully that's explained something that sounds quite complicated in quite a basic way. You may find when you first start doing it that you find it difficult to kind of break the pulse of 4/4 in your own head, but just keep practicing and eventually this stuff just seems to happen quite naturally. And I find having that 4/4 backbeat tends to mean that the riff is more enjoyable rather than something that's just complicated for the sake of it. If you have a method of writing polymeters and polyrhythms, please let me know in the comments because I want to steal your ideas. And also let me know what you think of this riff. Should I make a song out of it? I've had like a year-long writer's block and need to break it somehow. Well, that's it for today. See you next time.